Go. Tara Palmeri, thank you for joining me. This is a lot of
Thank
fun. And
you for having
congratulations on the red letter. Really
Thanks for having
exciting.
me. This is exciting. I've been a huge fan of Political Wire forever, so I'm really happy to be here, and I'm really happy that we were able to connect last week too, and just to get to pick your brain as someone who's been a media who's been in this game for so long and been so successful.
Well, anyway, it's very flattering. What you do is extremely great, and I've already enjoyed it, both your YouTube channel and your Substack newsletter, and I can't wait to see what you have in store in the weeks ahead. But ever since we spoke last week, which was the first time we've actually ever spoken, even though I've known about you for years, I've had a question because here you are, you literally become a true independent media venture. You put yourself up on these various platforms, Substack and YouTube. You've already, in a very short time, generated quite a number of subscribers, quite a number of followers. And it reminds me of kind of the early days in politics when we first had when we first had politicians taking advantage of digital media. And in 2004, Howard Dean used the internet for fundraising. In 2008, Barack Obama was really the first presidential candidate to use it to speak directly to voters, which was certainly interesting. Keep in mind, in 2008, the iPhone was brand new.
Oh, wow.
Twitter was only just launching. In 2012, I had a really interesting thing where I was at the Harvard Institute of Politics, and on one side of the table, you had the Mitt Romney campaign. On the other side of the table, you had Barack Obama's campaign. And the question was put to them: how did you drive up young voter turnout so much in that election when you had done so well in the previous 4 years? All expectations are that you would have that young voter turnout would have fallen relative over 4 years.
But they
And
grew.
but it grew dramatically. And what the secret was back in 2012 was Facebook. The Obama campaign realized they could use Facebook to essentially reach 98% of all young people on Facebook, which is kind of funny because Facebook is not something you'd think of as a young person's platform today. But anyway, I've been thinking about this since we spoke because what has happened since has been, in this last election particularly, is it seems like the Democrats lost total control of digital media and the Republicans own digital media and have used it so successfully at reaching their voters, particularly these low propensity voters.
Yeah, it's really weird. I mean, it's like the Republicans have been aware and using the entire influencer game for a long time, and it felt like the Democrats had just realized that they were influencers, and they really went out of their way to court them too at the DNC. Like they had a influencer lounge, and they had events for the influencers, the content creators, and they gave Harris access. I mean, Harris did not give much access to traditional print or even TV or any of the mainstream press, but she was giving access to these influencers and content creators. But it was almost like they were playing catch up because for so long the Turning Point group, I'd give them a lot of credit for this. Charlie Kirk's group, Turning Point, like they had created an army of content creator, of influencers, of contributors. Like they had like 250 of them that were all associated with Turning Point, and they would all create content. And then Charlie and his team would pick the ones who created the best content, and then they would, support them monetarily to create more content. And some would become paid contributors. It's almost like trying to become a contributor on Fox News, except you become a contributor on Turning Point, and you can say in your Twitter profile, I'm a Turning Point influencer, I'm a part of this bigger network. And they understood the need to create like mini stars within the network. And while people like kind of laugh well, for a long time they didn't take Turning Point seriously, they thought it was too fringe
Right.
and CPAC. I mean, they had a ball at the inauguration that was widely attended by administration officials like Kash Patel. Carrie Lake was there. JD Vance was there. Don Jr. I mean, they're being taken really seriously because of this network that they've grown over time of influencers. There isn't a network really yet for Democrats. They haven't figured it out. They don't have that like singular voice, and then a bunch of disciples, as I would say, underneath them. Brian Tyler Cohen is kind of becoming this person for the right, at the left. He has a company called Chorus. He brought a lot of these influencers to the State of the Union. Well, it's not the State of the Union, but Trump's address 2 weeks ago. And some of them are paid, but I didn't see any content that came out of it that was particularly remarkable. And I had heard that a lot of them felt like they were sort of left there without much direction, without having interviews set up. But like you have to kind of see these, they're like these influencer networks. You have to support your influencers, the people underneath you, to make sure that they're creating content. And it's something I think that the right has figured out, and the left is falling behind. And this is, I'm trying to think of others that have an influencer network out there on the right. I mean, they're supported by PAC money, which I really wasn't aware of how much PAC money is involved in this. Um,
Tons.
exactly,
Absolutely
tons of
tons.
PAC money. I mean, like Turning Points is obviously a PAC, but I didn't realize that individual content creators were getting PAC money as well, and they don't disclose it, which I thought was interesting because, like, if you watch a that is my psychotic dog, Pancetta. If you saw her, she's a white, fluffy little thing. She thinks she's an attack dog. I mean, I'll tell you. But to get back to that, this is the person ruining our interview, by the way.
Oh, they're very cute.
Yeah, yeah, she's horrible. Jeff Clark says I tuned in for Pancetta. Okay, sorry, I was going into what did I
We're
say?
talking we're talking about the PAC money that goes into the content creation,
Yeah, and like
particularly on the right.
they don't have to say like this advertisement or this content was created by the people who hate Donald Trump or this content was created by the people who hate Nancy Pelosi. Like they don't have to say those things that you would see in a pamphlet or on TV in a digital ad or on TV. So I think it gets a little murky in my opinion, to not really know who's giving them money because it's not cheap. Like we're creating content right now. We need to be paid. I mean, I'm asking for subscribers to support me. You have advertising based business, but this is how we do it. And if they're accepting PAC money, which I plan to never do, it's giving them an advantage, obviously, but it also allows them to create quality content. They can hire producers, they can have support teams, they can spend their days doing this, not having other jobs. So it's interesting, but I get the feeling that the Democrats are extremely disorganized. They haven't found like a leader. Pod Save America feels in the same way that they were the leaders, the guys from Pod Save America, like Tommy Vietor, John Favreau, and they were the Obama guys who really helped with Twitter and Facebook, to make sure that the youth was reengaged. I mean, they seem like they could be leaders in this space through their Pod Save America brand.
Mhm.
They have a lot of other content. I'm not entirely sure if they have a pack. That would be a good thing to look into, but it seems like a kind of place that would probably be okay with taking pack money and would then support other influencers. Like I see Brian Tyler Cohen going on their shows a lot, and I think he's like rising up as a kind of the I guess you could say he's like he's becoming the Charlie Kirk of the left in some ways, in the sense that he's trying to build a broader network.
So what's interesting is that, yeah, obviously you go on Pod Save America, you listen to their podcast, very popular, but it's actually very predictable. You know what you're getting. You're getting a lot of talking points from Democratic talking points. But what there was an interesting study this week from the progressive group Media Matters. In what they were evaluating really were these new media platforms out there, which include podcasts and YouTube channels and all the rest, which aren't really about politics. They might be about sports, they might be about more lifestyle issues, and yet the Republican talking points are coming in loud and clear through these other platforms. It's almost as if the Republicans have taken it next level in terms of how they're getting to voters because they know, certainly the Trump campaign knew that their voters are these low propensity voters. They're actually unfortunately not listening to you or me, Tara, most of the
Mm.
time. They don't even tune in about the election until the very last week or so, and then they end up voting. But the Republicans have figured out a way to get to these voters, and what you have the most engaged news readers right now are overwhelmingly going towards the Democrats, But then all of a sudden, an election happens, and they're terribly surprised because they seem to have missed it. And everything that they watched on the media that they consume suggested the election was a lot closer than it was, and they're all surprised the day after the election. And
Right, and
I find that fascinating.
yeah, and I think they're gonna have a hard time getting like a real read on what's happening if they're unhappy with mainstream media, and then the influencers are obviously like, it's their job, not necessarily their jobs, but generally what they're doing, unless they're in the straight news space, is they're trying to promote a candidate or an ideology or a messaging. So I think it's going to be hard for these Democrats to find news. But on the idea of like not going to news, like not going to news outlets, instead going to cultural figures like Joe Rogan. I mean, podcasting really has created this space in a big way as well, in the same way that Twitter and Facebook and those socials and TikTok, Instagram, podcasts. I mean, they've created a whole space for people who are not necessarily political but cultural figures to sort of be leader to be I guess transmitters of political power, you could say, or like, or at least endorsements. Like the Joe Rogan endorsement was a huge one for Trump, like no one can deny that. And traditionally Democrats, they had comedians, they had actors, they had all of the beautiful people wanted to endorse Democrats, but now they're seeing it backfire a little bit. Like Taylor Swift faced a lot of controversy for backing Joe Biden, and now a lot of them are just like, I don't want to go near any of this because I'm going to lose half of my followers, I guess you could say, or customers, or they're going to have problems like selling albums, or I don't people even buy albums, but you know what I mean. But like your reputation takes a hit sometimes now for getting involved in the political game, whereas a lot of these podcasters and these cultural figures that just stand for certain like ethos, like the manosphere in the Joe Rogan way. Like he doesn't seem to really care if he loses sponsorships, or I mean, he's already making $100 million or $150 million from Spotify. He seems to be okay with that, and I think that actually resonates, that authenticity, right? And right now, it feels like Hollywood is running scared a little bit after this election, this shellacking. Who knows? The Democrats could be right now, and they're, you know, congregating, figuring this out. But everyone I talk to who really is like on the front lines of this right now and creating content, they seem to be upset with the disorganization, and
Yeah.
it goes from the pack level down. So
Well, and if there's one episode in the campaign that really stood out to me as indicative of the problem was every election, 60 Minutes does a candidate interview. And Kamala Harris, she booked it. She was ready to do it. And Donald Trump said, no, he's not going to do it. And I remember hearing a lot of snickering on the Democratic side about how Trump was scared. He was scared of 60 Minutes. He didn't want to face real questions or something like this. And what was interesting was that when the interview with Kamala Harris aired, it aired, I think it was on a Monday or Tuesday during the week and not on the traditional Sunday at 7 time slot. The total viewership of that interview, which was not a great interview for her, she did fine, but it wasn't great. But it was only about 4.5 million people because of the time slot that it had. Had it been on Sunday following football or something like that, it would have been a much bigger deal. But Donald Trump, instead of doing that, he went to Joe Rogan, and he had, according to the YouTube statistics, he had 60 million people watch his a 3 hour podcast. Tara.
yeah, no, I mean, I listened to it for as long as I could like as long as I could listen. But they made the right choices. They
Yeah,
picked cultural figures that align with them in the same way that Kamala Harris sat down with Oprah. Oprah had a lot of cachet.
yeah,
They just they that the people in the middle, they no longer trusted the mainstream media. They went to different sources. People have just decided they want their media to be niche. They want the media that they want. They're not as interested in turning on TV and sitting there and watching. In the same way that we don't watch, like when I want to watch a show, I go to Netflix, I go to HBO Max. Well, I don't have HBO right now, but I should get it for the White Lotus. But you know what I'm saying? But like we go to the places where we think we're going to find the content we want. So you have to go to your audience. You can't just show up on the traditional outlets and expect them to find you there. people aren't watching the evening news anymore. They're looking on their
So,
phones. They're watching us on Substack.
so do you think do you think it's somehow related to the fact that the Democratic leadership, particularly the elected leadership up until recently, was just very old, all in their late 70s? I mean, Chuck Schumer, 70 years old with his flip phone, is one of the younger members of the leadership up until
Yeah.
Nancy Pelosi stepped aside. I mean, do you think that's the case?
I mean, the
Do you,
gerontocracy has certainly ruled the party, but I think Trump's team, being that they have really good instincts when it comes to these kind of things, cultural instincts. It was Trump's son, Barron, who told him to do all these podcasts. They troll. They make pretty decent content. Like if politics is all about trolling, I mean, they are the original trolls, the OGs.
yeah.
And I think for a long time, someone mentioned actually that Midas Touch is now trumping. Not to use the word Trump too many times, but Midas Touch is now beating Joe Rogan, which is interesting too. Um, but so that might be the opportunity to start creating content from to start creating content and have disciples following Midas Touch and creating more content. But yeah, they just understood that people were listening to podcasts. They understood the cultural power of getting Joe Rogan, and she Kamala Harris tried too. She went to call her daddy, but I think she just struggled in general. I think Democrats they have a hard time dealing with the media. For so long, they thought that the media was on their side. You have to admit this, right? I mean, like when
Yeah.
I write something, I get nasty emails, calls from Democrats. Republicans barely call to complain, right? Although I've been getting a lot of messages from the Trump team actually since I went independent. Um, but I do think that they always kind of like took the media for granted. And now that the mainstream media isn't like readily available for them and this isn't doing it for them in the same way. It's not giving them that hit of dopamine. It's not giving them that kind of reach. They're unclear of how to navigate these waters. Whereas like Republicans have been doing this for a while. Like look at Ben Shapiro. He built Daily Wire about like 10 years ago, and he has created tons of disciples out of Daily Wire. Candace Owens being one of them. I mean, she left, but now Tucker Carlson has his own network. It's like it's not just Fox. Like Fox is just it's just one place. There are so many places now. Megyn Kelly, I mean, she hasn't created any disciples, but she's got a really powerful voice. And the Democrats are really starting to build that up. But I think that the
You
Republicans
see,
knew what it was like to be on the outs for so long, and Democrats were they were nervous about.
Tara, this is what the Democrats had back in 2008. I mean, I remember at the 2008 convention in Denver, Netroots Nation was there, and they were all about nurturing the netroots and the progressive side of the internet, and it was about creating content and trying to activate voters on your side. And there was it was very powerful. It was very persuasive. It was kind of the thing. It was what made Obama different. It's what allowed Obama to communicate directly with voters instead of just, through traditional channels. It was really exciting. It was really interesting, but that seems to have gone away, and they don't seem to have any of that right now.
I do think that the whole cancel culture that that sort of really the kind of policing of language in some ways that made it difficult to be authentic. If you're
Interesting.
if you're on a show and you're worried that whatever you say is going to be used against you, it's really hard to come off as authentic. And that's why you hear them now cursing a lot and trying to talk about sports or culture, like who's it, Wes Moore and Josh Shapiro. They want to talk about sports now. I mean, they were in boxes that they created themselves, and that was because they were afraid to offend people, which no one wants to offend anyone. But it had gotten to a point where the left of the party controlled them so much, and they were so afraid of the left of the party that I think that they were unable to speak. Like for the most part, I get advice sometimes from the godfather of podcasts, my boss at The Ringer, Bill Simmons, and his take is politicians are boring. He's like, don't even book them. Like they're just boring. um, They speak in talking points, like you said. They're stilted. They're afraid to say the wrong thing. They're constantly aware that they're being quoted and it can be used against them. And so because of that, especially in this economy now, where like the attention economy, it's so hard to get any attention. They have to scream and shout and say crazy things to be heard. Like some what used to cause a whole news cycle, like a stray quote back in 2009 or 2008 when I started, you wouldn't hear a hiccup now. Like nobody cares if somebody has a mistress or a this or a that, because the entire game has changed with Donald Trump. He's created an entire different media ecosystem for covering news, especially political news. So it's just like for these politicians to stand out, they really have to be unique. They have to be iconoclasts. They have to do something different. I mean, I had an interview with John Fetterman a few months ago, and he made a lot of news because he spoke about his party and their inability to win back white men. He thinks that they've really had a hard time connecting culturally. But you're really not going to get much news unless you step outside of the bounds. And I think Democrats are realizing that. Like, I'm getting a lot more requests from Democrats to come on my show. So, and it's almost to the point where I'm like, it's okay. I don't want any more of you. Like, not that I don't, but I try to be balanced. Like, if I'm gonna have one Democrat on the show, I have a Republican. Frankly, I love having other reporters on the show, like you. I feel like they're the most candid. They know the information as well. They'll speak more freely. Political strategists and experts are interesting to me too. But politicians, they're just constantly tongue tied, and
Yeah.
nobody. There's so much
So
better
what do you
content
think?
out there than that.
So what do you think about Gavin Newsom's podcast? He's had, I think, 3 episodes. He had Charlie Kirk, Steve Bannon, and I believe this week it's Tim Walz. What do you think of his podcast?
I mean, his guest selection is like interesting enough, right? Starting with Charlie Kirk and Steve Bannon. I think that shows that Gavin's willing to go into the lion's den, and you know, podcasts are different than the kind of interview you see on TV. People don't tend to joust as much on podcasts. Like you don't really like to hear the arguing in the ear, right? You're listening to somebody's conversation that you really want to be a part of. It's just it's not a place for like meet the press crossfire. And so I guess at times it sounded a little chummy, and that bothered people, right? And some of the comments that he made, and I've heard from people on the left that they're kind of over him for that. I think Gavin Newsom, as he eyes 2028, is trying to step away from coastal elite and try to hug the middle, and he's getting some street cred for that. Tim Walz, interesting choice, but Walz is also on a tour right now saying what he thinks they did wrong. I'd have him on as a guest tomorrow. There you go.
Right.
That's a guy willing to make some news.
Right.
And that was the other problem with Kamala Harris. Like, she came out in talking points ready to be clipped and shared, but you never got the feeling that she was saying something that was so authentic that she was just making the news by saying what she really thought. So I think I think that's another thing that she was overly trained. The internet doesn't reward that. It doesn't reward talking points anymore. It
So
doesn't.
you had a post today that I linked to on Political Wire about Gavin Newsom and how Donald Trump was terrified he might end up running against him. Do you want to talk
Yes,
about that?
for sure. So I had Alex Eisenstadt. He's my former colleague at Politico on my podcast, and we started talking about his new book, Revenge, which is basically about how Trump clawed his way back to become president in 2024 from like the depths after January 6th. And we talked about what it was like for Trump when he was, watching the Republican primary that he really wasn't engaged in at all for the most part. He wasn't willing to debate the other contenders, and he was really rising above them in a sense that it didn't make sense for him to even do so. And he was really paying attention to Democrats at that time, more so than Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis. And that was because, he wasn't really sure that he was going to run against Biden. He didn't believe it himself, just like a lot of people who didn't think that Biden would run. He also didn't believe Biden would run. And so he was paying close attention to Gavin Newsom. Trump is a very visual guy, and according to Alex, he thought that Gavin had the right look, that he was slick. He's a well put together person, that he was willing to fight, that he did well on TV. And so he was worried, and he said he talked to his staff about this. He said, I don't want to kill Joe Biden. Like, I don't want to go after him too hard because I might have to deal with Gavin Newsom instead.
Right.
But his estimation of Gavin Newsom sort of started to fall when he saw Gavin Newsom, in some ways, you could say, punching down by doing a debate with Ron DeSantis, and that was in the fall of 2023. Ron was pretty much on his last legs, seemed like a publicity stunt almost, and he decided to do an interview with. He decided to do a debate on Fox News with Gavin Newsom, and Trump, according to Alex, always thought that Ron DeSantis was an idiot, but he thought that Gavin Newsom would do better,
Right.
and that
I did too.
is
I did too, actually, watching that debate. I actually was surprised that Newsom didn't do better.
yeah, yeah. So he was sort of disappointed by that, and then but he thought that Kamala Harris was an idiot. I don't think that's a surprise anymore. That's been widely reported. He called JB Pritzker a slob. Like, these are some of the people who might end up being, the 2028 nominees. And one of them might end up being the nominee for Democrats in 2028. Trump, of course, teases that he might run in 2028. I think he does that to troll a little bit. But it's just interesting if he is going to continue to be a power broker in the party who he views as a threat. He said that he stopped thinking that Gavin Newsom was a threat, though, I think eventually. And I think with the California wildfires, I doubt it. But it's interesting
Yeah.
to know who he has his eye on, especially after he just got $100 million from Elon Musk, and he's going to have a war chest of about $500 million and it's at his disposal. So he can play the role of a power broker in 2028.
Yeah, well, it's going to be interesting to see. I know a lot of Democrats that I talk to are really disappointed in Gavin Newsom for essentially platforming Steve Bannon and Charlie Kirk. There's a lot of pushback on doing that. I mean, I get why Newsom shows up on Fox News. I think it's a little bit like Pete Buttigieg. He likes to be able to make himself present. He likes to be able to spar with rivals and with rival views. And Buttigieg does a very good job. I think Gavin Newsom also does generally a good job at doing that. I'm not so sure whether this podcast is going to help, but it's got me really thinking about, and as well as you launching your own venture here, it's got me thinking that if pretty much anybody can put themselves up on these platforms, start a newsletter, start a podcast, where what are the Democrats doing here? Because it seems like they're not taking advantage of this digital media anymore like they used to.
I mean, even Ted Cruz has had a podcast for a long time. They've just created their alternate media because for so long the right really wasn't welcome in the mainstream media, so they had to create their alternate media. They already had the infrastructure, and so they've been doing this for 15 years now, maybe even longer. Drudge Report, Breitbart, they were creating their own online alternate media, and the left didn't really have to. They just relied on the mainstream media.
Yeah. So we're kind of coming up to a half an hour, but do you want to tell us what you've got coming next for the rest of the week? Anything to highlight?
Yeah, I'm still reporting. I think, I've been I wish I could tease more. I've been recording a lot of podcasts. But tomorrow I'm going to hit the phones and do some more reporting on for my Thursday red letter. It's been really fun though on Substack and just sort of getting to know all the other players like yourself and just being able to just push out the content that I am creating myself through my interviews, through my reporting, and getting it out there instantly, and getting the feedback from you as well, like in my chats. And I hope that this is an independent venture. I don't take PAC money. I don't have a side. I'm an independent journalist. I'm not giving that up. So I hope you'll consider becoming a paid subscriber to my channel, to my newsletter, The Red Letter. And I'm on YouTube too at Tara Palmeri. And you can find it all at tarapalmeri.com.
Awesome. Well, I'm already a paid subscriber and look forward to seeing what you have Thursday night.
Thanks so much. I appreciate
All
this
right.
time. Bye.
Bye. Bye, Tara.
Yeah.